Okay. So we had just covered installation settings and then the equipment section. Now we're going to move over to the thresholds section. So under thresholds, we have a few different things. Let me see if I can get a pointer mouse deal. Why can I not do that? Shouldn't be that hard, man. There you go. All right. So the first one we'll look at is the heating differential temperature. And this will also come up on the cooling side, so we can just talk about it, once. But this is the amount of degrees that we have to exceed the set point before we're actually going to engage the heating. So if you have the heating set for 70 degrees, it has to drop down to 69.5 for it to kick the heat on. And then it'll run the heat until it gets back up to 70 and then shut it off. If you wanted to, you could change this to be 1 degree, and then it would kick on at 69 and drive itself back up to the set point of 70 degrees. I would never make it more than 1 degree. Half degree is usually the correct answer for 99% of people's homes and buildings. 1 degree is the most you'd ever go. I don't even know why they have it more than that. If you set it for 3 degrees and somebody had to wait till it was 67 in their house before the heat turned on, when they specifically said they wanted it to be 70 in the house, there's no way that would fly. So half a degree is good. 1 degree is okay. Nothing more than that ever. The next one is heat dissipation time. So when your furnace specifically, although it would apply to electric heat as well, but when it is running in the heating mode, obviously the heat exchanger is roaring hot. And when I turn off the gas valve, there's still a bunch of heat stored in that heat exchanger that is going to go somewhere. It can go 3 different places. It could make its way up the flue. It can make its way up the duct, or it can radiate out the cabinet. What I don't want it to do is I don't want the heat to go out the flue. So as soon as the gas valve shuts, I turn the inducer motor off as well. And then what I do is I turn on the blower fan, or rather I leave the blower fan on to send as many BTUs as I can that are still in the heat exchanger down into the duct system. Most furnaces do this automatically on their own. They have a 60, 90, or 120 second timer on them. However, if your furnace doesn't have this, or you want to make it longer than your furnace, you can set one here in the thermostat. Now, it's not additive. If I set it for 60 seconds in the stat, and the furnace also has its own 60-second fan delay on it, it'll still be 60 total. Those two timers start at the same time. So if I put one in the stat and the furnace has one, the fan will actually run for whichever one was longer. So if I have 90 seconds in the furnace and I only add 60 to the stat, all right, well, it's going to run 90 seconds. All right. The next one up is heating minimum on time. The default is 5 minutes. Once we engage the gas valve or the electric heat, it's going to stay on for this many minutes no matter what. So even if I make it to the set point, it's still going to run for at least 5 minutes. That's there to make sure that we get good usage of our heat exchanger. 5 minutes is kind of a short run time. You shouldn't be running it less than 5 minutes anyway. I mean, maybe if they're running their heat when it's like 70 degrees outside, maybe. But in the actual wintertime, it should run way more than 5 minutes. If not, it's grossly oversized. And I bitched about that enough, so I won't talk about oversized stuff. If it is oversized and you want to Band-Aid it a little bit, you can make this maybe 7 minutes instead of 5. Now, that's going to give you a bigger temperature swing in the house, but it'll give you a little longer run cycle so it doesn't beat the equipment up quite as bad. But 5 minutes is pretty normal, and you usually leave it there. Cooling differential, I didn't have a slide for that, but it works the same as the heating differential. If I have it set for 74 degrees cooling, it'll kick on at 74.5, and it'll cool it back down to 74. Once again, half a degree is good. 1 degree is the highest you'll set this for. Do not make it anything higher. Cool dissipation timer works exactly the same as the heat dissipation timer, except I don't want to use this at all, ever. There's never going to be a project you want this. It comes factory defaulted to auto. You need to switch it from auto to 0. When the cooling call is over, I want the blower fan to shut off immediately. I don't want to continue running the fan at all for any reason. If I continue running the fan, all that's going to do is help take the moisture that's sitting on the coil and blow it back into the airstream, evaporate it back into the airstream, instead of letting it drain down and go out the condensate. So I want to make sure the fan is off in this scenario. So switch it from auto to 0 for 100% of your projects, unless you do a project for a buddy that lives in like Arizona where it's like freaky dry or something like that. But everywhere else in the world, that's not a desert, make sure this is 0. The screenshot shows you an example of what somebody did. They turned their fan on. In this case, I think it was like 3 or 4 minutes. They turned their fan on while there was still moisture on their evaporator just to prove a point. And the indoor humidity in the space actually went up, what, 7%, 8%? just in that few minutes alone. So we definitely don't want to do that. All right, the next one up is reverse staging. Now, earlier on when we were talking about some of these, one of the choices was to set this up for automatic staging, automatic control, or manual. So if you left it on automatic earlier, which would have been last week's discussion, if you left it on auto, you're not going to see some of these screens. If you put it on manual, you are going to see some of these screens. That's where you're going to be able to pick things like the differential temperature for heating and cooling, and it's going to be where you're going to be able to pick this reverse staging option. I like reverse staging. I turn it on all the time for every single project. And let me explain to you how regular staging works, and then I'll explain to you how reverse staging works. And the regular staging discussion applies to almost every thermostat you've ever used in your life. There's a few that don't do it this way, but almost every thermostat, two-stage heating or two-stage cooling stat will work like this. We'll do a cooling example, but heating would work the same way. So let's say I have a 74-degree cooling set point. That means I'm going to turn the cooling stage 1 on when it's 74.5 because I left it at the half a degree differential that we previously talked about. And then the default differential for stage 2 is typically 2 degrees. So that means I'm going to turn on stage 2 when I get up to 76 degrees. So my set point is 74. Stage 1 turns on at 74.5. If it continues to get warmer in there at 76, I'm going to bang on another stage. All right? That's pretty normal sequencing. Then what normally happens on an Ecobee stat or just about any other stat you've ever used is both stage 1 and 2 continue to run until they both get everything all the way back down to the original set point of 74 degrees. So they both turn off together. Now, reverse staging works a little different. On the up staging side, it works the same, 74, 74.5, 76 stage 2. But then on the downside, when I get back down to 74.5, it's going to disengage stage 2, but it's going to leave stage 1, Y1, running. And then if that Y1 is able to get me back down to 74 all by his lonesome, fantastic. If he doesn't, I'm still doing an awesome job dehumidifying because he's running a long time. And then eventually, if it drifts back up to 76, it'll turn on second stage again. So regular staging, it only stages up and everything turns off together. Reverse staging means it can stage up and down and continuously go up and down as needed within that band. So I would always turn this on. It gives you tighter temperature control. I shouldn't say tighter temperature control because it never gets you down to 74. It gives you more time near 74, if that makes sense. Because when I'm running stage 1 here in this middle range, around 74.5 and 75, I get a lot of run hours there. So I don't necessarily get tighter control. I get more consistent control, more consistent discharge air temperature. Instead of banging everything on and having really cold air and then everything shuts off and I have warm air blowing on me, I usually have some level of cool air blowing on me because Y1 pretty much never turns off, which is awesome. And then because Y1 seldom turns off, I get really good dehumidification. I'll remind you guys from last week, if you have any questions, type them in as we go. Anything you want to ask, we'll try to address it as we're talking about it. So that's how reverse staging works. For heating, it would work the same way. It just would be, opposite. When we got below the heating set point is when things start turning on, but it would work very similar to this. Oops, one more arrow I forgot. If you have a heat pump, which I know a lot of you guys said you didn't necessarily have, but if you do, or you do, 10 heat pumps a year or something like that, it's important to understand the efficiency of the different types of heating systems you might have. If you've got a furnace or boiler and it's running natural gas or propane or even oil for that matter, or any fossil fuel, it's going to be in the 80 and 90% efficiency range, right? So if I have a condensing furnace, for example, it's going to be 95, 96, 97, maybe 98% efficient, right? And boilers are pretty much the same thing. If I have electric resistance heat, then I'm 100% efficient. Every kilowatt that I buy from the power company turns into heat inside my home. So I have perfect efficiency in that regard, at least at my house. We can argue about the power plant, but at my house, I have perfect efficiency 100%. If I have an air source heat pump, which is what we're talking about now with this section of the thermostat, I'm going to be, let's say, 250, maybe 300% efficient. There's a range on there, and that range is dependent on what the current outdoor air temperature is. So I'm going to be very efficient, way more efficient than a furnace or boiler or electric heat. Now, if your choices are running a furnace or electric heat, well, even though electric heat is more efficient than a furnace, usually natural gas is way cheaper than electricity. So you buy a furnace, and that's what we do a lot in our central market here in the central Midwest. But an air source heat pump, he uses the same fuel source as electric heat. They're both buying watts. They're both buying electricity to run. So there's never, ever, ever a reason to run your electric heater instead of running your air source heat pump. Always run the air source heat pump, and the electric heater is just there to supplement things when it gets freakishly cold. Because when it gets really, really cold, the heat pump can't get as much heat going. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with heat pumps, and you're wondering how the hell it can be more than 100%, my coach in high school told me to give 110%, and that was impossible. So I started mathematically arguing with him, and of course, I got benched. You can't be more than 100%, right? Well, you can be more than 100%. With the case of the furnace, boiler, and electric heat, I'm buying a fuel, and I'm converting that fuel into heat. In the case of a heat pump, I am not making any heat at all. I'm just moving heat. I'm finding heat that's already in the air outside, or in the case of geothermal, in the water. But in the air source heat pump, I'm finding heat in the air that's outside, and I'm moving the heat to the inside. So I'm only paying for electricity to move heat. I'm not paying to make heat, which is why a heat pump can be so much more efficient than electric heat. So I want electric heat to do very little and hardly ever run, and I want to try to get everything done with the air source heat pump unless it's cold enough that I can't get it done. So most heat pumps are rated by AHRI, and they're tested at 17 degrees outside and 47 degrees outside. So those are the 2 points they're tested. So just about every heat pump that you'll ever run into can run down to 17 degrees, and most can run colder than that. I think the worst one that we have at Carrier and Bryant runs down to 10 degrees of heating, and that's the 5-stage inverter unit. And then all the other models, they run lower than that even. So some of them run down to negative 25. So just keep that kind of in mind when we're setting these things up. So when I'm doing this heat pump optimization, I have to understand that. So when I click on auxiliary savings optimization, so auxiliary heat is my electric heat in this example. When I click on that, my choices are going to be minimum, basic, balance, super, and maximum. And nobody knows what the hell that means. There used to be numbers here, but that was confusing homeowners. And like we said last week, most Ecobee thermostats and most thermostats in general are installed by homeowners, not HVAC guys. So they're trying to make all the language easy for homeowners. So they got rid of all the numbers, which confused people. And now they just have these words, which now confuses me. The good news is if you click on one of these, it'll tell you what it does. So minimum is 0.5 degree, basic is 1, balance is 1.5, super is 2, and maximum is 2.5. And if you read the description, keep the indoor temperature within 2 degrees for super. Auxiliary heat is expensive. We recommend selecting super. That means I'm not going to kick my auxiliary heat on unless I get 2 degrees out of set point. I'm going to give the heat pump 2 degrees worth of chance to get things done. So if my set point is 70 degrees and my heat pump is running and it's above 68 in the house, there's no reason for me to kick on the electric heat. I'm going to try to get it done. If the customer doesn't like that and they want it to be tighter temperature control, they can pick one of these other options, but it'll cost them a lot more in electricity. So that's the choice they're making. Super is probably what we'd recommend. 2 degrees is a pretty traditional separation between heat pump and auxiliary heat. I can also lock out the auxiliary heat at a certain temperature. So my heat pump is going to be sized for cooling typically, which means I'm not going to have enough heat in our market. I'm going to have enough heat when it's like 40 degrees outside, and I might have enough heat when it's 22 degrees outside. But at some point, I'm not going to get enough heat out of that heat pump. And it's very dependent upon the model of heat pump that I have. So I'm going to need to pick some scenario in which that I don't really need to run the auxiliary heat anymore. So right now on the slide, they're showing 35 degrees. So that means if it's above 35 degrees, I'm expecting my heat pump to do it all on its own. If it's below 35, I'm expecting the heat pump and the auxiliary to work together as a team. Okay? So I want to get this set for an appropriate amount. What's an appropriate temperature? Well, the good or the bad news is there's no correct answer here. Well, there's a correct answer. There's no singular correct answer that I can give you and say, oh, you always set it for 32 degrees and it's perfect. That's not the case because there's a wide range of what a heat pump may be able to handle. So what I did is I used that same opcost calculator that we used last week to do 3 different examples. And I specifically blocked out the models of heat pumps in this case, because I didn't want you to see those heat pumps and think that's always the answer. Because the answer is not even always the same for every model of heat pump. It's a function of the model of heat pump versus the load of that specific house. So if you use the opcost calculator, you tell it on the left-hand side what the loads of the home are, you tell it what equipment you want to use, and then it tells you the answer. Right? So I don't want you to think there's a certain answer for all heat pumps. I don't want you to think there's a certain answer for every time I have a VNA 9 or whatever, or VNA 8, excuse me. That's not the case. So I got 3 examples here. There's a thermal breakpoint and an economic breakpoint, like we mentioned before. Thermal breakpoint is when my heat pump, whatever model I chose up here, cannot keep up. What outdoor temperature cannot do it alone? So whatever model this was, at 33 degrees and below, he needs help. But this other model, he can make it all the way down to 19 before he needed help. And then this last model that I picked, he can make it down to 11 degrees before he needed help. Right? So when I'm doing this heat pump optimization, I don't care about the economic breakpoint really, because both cases, the heat pump and electric heat are electricity is their fuel source. But if I was doing dual fuel like we talked about last week, then that would matter. But for this point in this discussion with the aux heat max outdoor temperature, I only care about the thermal breakpoint. So if I took this first one and he can make it down to 33 degrees by himself, I guess I could just make it 33, right? So if it's above 33, heat pump only. If it's below 33, heat pump and auxiliary heat. I usually add 5 degrees to this number. So I would make this guy 38. I would make this guy 24. I would make this guy 15. So at 15 degrees on this model, whatever model he was, is when I would say, you know what, above 15, he's not going to need any help. I have that 5-degree band in there typically, just that because if I'm coming on a setback or something like that, I don't want it to take like forever to heat the house. Stephen asks, are these thresholds available in all models of Ecobee? And he asked that at 2:15, so we probably were on this slide. So yes, if you configured the Ecobee for a heat pump, then you would have this auxiliary heat max temperature. If you're talking about some of these other ones that we were just talking about, with the reverse staging and things like that, that would only be available if you told it you had 2-stage heat or 2-stage cooling. If you told it you had single-stage heat or single-stage cooling, then you wouldn't see these choices. We kind of talked about it a little bit last week, but Ecobee tries not to make you look at screens that don't apply to what you don't have. So if you pick single-stage equipment, you might not see a lot of these choices here. But if you have 2-stage equipment, you should have seen everything that I just picked. And then if you have a heat pump and a thermostat, you should start seeing the auxiliary heat related settings that we're talking about right now. The other way to do it, if you don't like using software, and I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you didn't like using software, you could do it the way we've done it since I started working here in the 90s and probably 40 years before that. You could plot it out on the heat pump balance worksheet that comes in all of the manuals for every heat pump. I believe it's in the product data manual for Bryant and Carrier stuff. And you figure out what your heat load is. So let's just say this is Chicagoland area. My design temp is basically 0 degrees. And I needed, on my load calc, I needed a 55,000 BTU. So right there, boom, that's my line. I draw it on a 45-degree angle down this way until it hits the other line. So this is the load line of my house. As the outdoor temperature changes, my heating and cooling needs are going to change. Now, obviously, there's other factors in there, like, well, what if I came home and turned every light bulb on? Okay, we're not talking about that, dude. We're talking about when all the lights are off, nobody's home, it's dark, it's just sitting there trying to maintain 70 degrees, whatever. All right, that's what we're talking about. That's what I did my load calc based on. So I draw that line there, and then all the size, this chart is specific to one model of heat pump. So then all the sizes of that model of heat pump are on here. If I happen to have the 3-ton size, I look at the line there to see where it intersects, and in this case, it's 30 degrees. So for this model, whatever chart this model came out of, whatever book it was, his 3-ton unit would not be able to keep up once it was below 30 degrees. Because over here, I need this much heat. No problem. I got it. 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 Boom. Oh, you need whatever that is, 25,000 BTUs. My heat pump can only make 19,000 BTUs. I'm shorthanded right there. So I need somebody to make up this little difference right here. And between this black line and my red line is how much auxiliary heat I need to help out with. So I need a lot of heat here. I need even more heat to be helped out over here. My heat pump's only going to be doing this much heat. He's only going to be doing 12,000 BTUs, but I needed 55,000 BTUs on a 0-degree day. All right, so this worksheet will be available for each model series of heat pump, right, whatever it is. And then in the book, there'd be a one for each tonnage within that model series. You should be getting the same answers here as you're getting here, or within a degree or two. Configure staging manually. I don't know how I got a little bit of order on here, but this slide should have been like 3 slides ago. It's defaulted to automatic. You have to put it on manual to be able to see some of the stuff I just showed you the past couple slides. I'll have to make a note to flip those slides. They're out of order a little bit. And then additionally for the heat pump, because we looked at it before on the furnace and AC side. Now we're looking at it again because it's a heat pump. So I pick my max outdoor temperature, but if I had this configured for manual, I could also pick the delta between running the compressor and the auxiliary. If I have more than one stage of auxiliary, then I can enable reverse staging on the auxiliary heat as well, as I've already done it on the compressor. So all those same kind of things I could do on the compressor and on the auxiliary heater. Then down below all the staging related stuff, there's a couple more options on there. One of them is temperature correction. This is where you can calibrate the thermostat to match whatever you want to make it match. So in this picture here, I'm making it match my fluke meter. Or actually, it already did match it, but I could have made it, changed it if I needed to. So these sensors are pretty good. They're pretty accurate. If they're not accurate, before you start changing them, the first thing I want you to do is make sure there's nothing going on behind that wall. It is super, super common for there to be an open plenum type wall that air is moving through. Now, this might not even be an open airflow path for return air on your furnace. It could just be an open airflow path in the house in general because the house is not sealed very well. And cold air will move through there. If you go up to someone's outlets and you hold your hand over it in the winter and you feel a little bit of cold air, that same cold air is hitting the back of this thermostat. And Ecobee stats, more than other thermostats, are very susceptible to that cold air behind the wall issue. So if you have that issue, that's the first thing you want to check if the sensor's not reading what you think it should read. If you have that issue, you should seal that hole up with a can of expanding spray foam. Assuming you've got rid of that discussion and that's not the problem, and you don't have a diffuser blowing right on the thermostat or anything weird like that, and then you just want to tweak the stat to match something else, that's where you'd come into this temperature correction, and you could add however many degrees or subtract however many degrees in half-degree increments. So if the customer thinks it feels like 77 in there and your thermostat says 75, I'll come into here and I'll put +2. The 75 on my stat will now start displaying 77. It will be 77. It'll control the 77. The customer will be happy. You can argue with them about how accurate your thermostat is or whatever, but they honestly don't care. They just know that it feels like 77 to them because they got an old mercury bulb that says it is, or because their old thermostat felt a certain way, or because you took an old bimetal thermostat off the wall that was there for 32 years, and over the years the metal no longer expands and contracts at the same rate, but they don't notice it because it happens slowly over 32 years, yada, yada, yada. So in any case, they think it feels like something, and it really is something else. Who cares? Make it match whatever they want. The same thing with the humidity. If they got some kind of hydrometer on the wall, or like, no, it's actually supposed to be 42% here, and your stupid stat says it's 36. All right, fine. You know what I'll do? I'll add 6% to mine, and it'll all be the same. All right, so you can do that as well on both the temperature and the humidity. Then the last thing on there is the thermal protect. This comes disabled. I turn this on, and I usually set it for either 10 or 15 degrees. What that does is, in this case, I have 3 thermostats: the stat, this remote sensor, and that remote sensor. If these guys, if any one of them drifts, let's say I set it for 15 degrees. If one of them drifts more than 15 degrees away from the other ones, I'm going to assume it's bad. I can't imagine a scenario in which the upstairs is 15 degrees hotter than the downstairs. If it is, there's way more problems with this house, and there's no chance of this customer ever being happy anyway, and you need to give them 2 different systems or seal the house better or something. You can also make it 10 degrees if you want a little bit tighter, if the house is pretty decent. Then between upstairs and downstairs, if you only notice it being 2-3 degrees different, maybe you set this for 10. And if any one of these ever gets outside of 10, the stat's going to alarm you and the homeowner and say, hey, this thing's messed up, man. You got to check it out. Oh, there was one more below that. I forgot. Installer code. So if you want, you can enable this. Now, before you actually enable it, make sure you know the password, because the password is not well documented anywhere. And it's not well documented on purpose because we don't want the homeowners to find the password. Could they Google it and find it in some random weird chat group somewhere? Yeah, I'm sure they can. But we'd rather they didn't find it. So if you install this thermostat for the homeowner, I would enable the installer code, right, on every one of these. And then if the homeowner tries to get into all these installation settings that we just talked about today or at the end of last week, they will not be able to get into them unless they enter this code. This code's not editable. It's always going to be 3262 for every project you go to. There's another lockout on the stat unrelated to this that's a homeowner-related lockout that they can lock their family out on. And that code is adjustable, but it's a different discussion from this. This only locks out the install screens. So I would turn it on and I would lock them out if you're the one that just installed it. Now, if you're not the one that installed it, you just walked into the house to do a maintenance call, they already happen to have an Ecobee, I would not lock them out in that case. because they probably already know about these screens and they probably been farting around in there. And if you lock them out, they're going to be like, dude, why'd you lock me out of this stuff, man? It's not your property. What, you can't do that, right? So if the stat's already there, leave it alone. If you're the one that just installed it, I would lock it out. And if they really want it to be unlocked, they can call me and ask me, and I'll help them, you know. But I'd rather they think that they can't get into it. After we get through the equipment and threshold screens, there is one other screen on the overall installation menu. The third one is called Test Equipment. So if you click on Test Equipment, each one of your outputs will be on here, right? So whether it's AC or furnace or heat pump or auxiliary heat, fan, humidifier, dehumidifier, anything you've wired to those 6 output terminals, seven output terminals, you have the ability to force any one of those on and make sure that they work here. This is the way you want to do it instead of going to the thermostat and just jacking the set point really high or really low. Because if you do that, there's stuff in the thermostat where it's trying to avoid second stage heat and second stage cooling because it knows those are the least efficient stages. So you don't want to sit there waiting for the delays when you're trying to test your stuff out. So come in here, force it on, make sure that the unit actually kicks on in the stage you think it's going to kick into. Then you know all your wiring and everything is nice and good. As you guys have questions, ask them, please. Type them in the chat box, or if it's a really in-depth question, let me know and I'll unmute you. Let me go see if I shouldn't say that to do that and then not actually come see if there's any questions, huh? Okay, I think we're good on the questions right now. So we'll keep moving. All right, time is good as well. All right. Preferences section. So we're done with the install section. We're now into the preferences section. This is primarily for the homeowner. However, when you install one of these or you're servicing it, I want you to go into this section anyway, because some of the settings may be ones that you need to change on your end as an installer. Mostly homeowner stuff, a little bit of relevancy to you. So temperature display, Fahrenheit or Celsius, that's self-explanatory. The heating range, I think that range is pretty wide. 45 degrees. I don't want my customers setting this house down to 45 degrees unless they really, really want to. So I usually bump that up to something else, typically 55 or maybe 60 degrees. If it's your own house, you may want to have a really tight range on there so your family doesn't get crazy with it, right? Or we have a lot of these Ecobee stats at our own buildings at TEC, and I think I have the heating locked between 61 and 73. 12 degrees is the closest that you can make it. So that's how I somehow ended up at 61 and 73. So none of my coworkers can lower it below 61, and nobody can jack it up above 73 for heating. But they have control within that range. And the same thing for cooling, obviously. It works the same way. So you can do that. You can tighten it up a little bit if you want to. You can name the thermostat. The customer will probably name it whatever they want to name it. The only time this really matters to you, the installer, is if you've installed more than one thermostat. Because if the customer logs into their app, and there's 2 stats that are both called main floor, they're both called Ecobee or something like that, that just gets confusing. So name them something unique if there's more than one of them. Name them first floor, second floor, basement, bedroom, something like that. You can pick them from a drop-down list, or you can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you can type in whatever you want. The brightness, the sound stuff, that Alexa, they can disable Alexa sounds if they want to. That's really their choice. The brightness stuff, also their choice on how bright they want the screen to be when it's in standby or when they're using it. The one thing I do want to point out to you guys, because it'll come up for you, is this little checkbox here. If the thermostat happens to be installed in someone's bedroom, which sometimes it is, if there's 2 systems and there's one upstairs, you want to check this. Then when it's in the sleep schedule, the stat will go completely black, right? It won't be like a giant beacon light when they're trying to sleep. So keep that in mind. That's there if you need it. Standby timer, that's just after 60 seconds or whatever you say, it'll drop down from active down to standby brightness. No big deal there. The hold action button is important. Every time the customer overrides something, meaning they raise the heating set point or the cooling set point, or they turn the fan mode or whatever manually from the stat and make it stop following its schedule, the stat is going to do that for a certain amount of time, then it's going to revert back to the schedule. Some customers don't want a schedule, and they want to just walk up like they did with their old stat and bump it to a certain set point and leave it there for days and weeks indefinitely. And I don't know why they bought an Ecobee in that case. That doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what they want to do. Fine. So they might keep overriding the stat, and then a few hours later, it goes back to the old set points, and they start getting mad at you because of it. It's probably the way they have this hold action set up. So these are your choices. It could be a 2-hour override, and then it reverts back to the schedule, 4 hours. You can have it stay at the override until the next schedule kicks in. So let's say it's supposed to go occupied at 6 p.m. when I get home from work, but I happen to be off today, so I override it. Well, it stays in my overridden set points until 6 p.m., then it goes back to normal, right? Or I can have it hold forever, which is until you change it. So I can set it up for any one of those 4. Or what I can do, if I don't know what the customer wants, I can pick decide at time of change. And then later on when the customer overrides the stat, every time they override it, it'll ask them, hey, what do you want to do, man? You want to do this for 2 hours, 4 hours till the next schedule, or keep it forever? It'll ask them every single time. So for a homeowner, I probably would pick decide at time of change. In a commercial building, I typically pick either 2 or 4 hours. Like my classrooms, I have it set for 4 hours because we don't do any classes less than 4 hours really. And for offices, it's usually set for 2 hours because the only time you would use it in an office is if you stayed late at night. And if you're going to stay after 6 o'clock and leave at 8, fine. If you're leaving at 9, guess what? You got to press the button 2 times for as often as that happens, right? This is what it looks like for the customer's end. If I pick the decided time of change, every time they raise their set points or lower them, it'll pop up with this question. And it won't always say until I go to sleep. It'll say until I go to sleep, until I come home, until I go away, depending on what the next mode happens to be. Smart recovery. I can enable and disable this separately for heating and cooling. I don't know why, but someone must have wanted it separate, so now it's 2 separate things. It's defaulted to on. Most people don't realize that, and most people use it not realizing it, and it works well, and everything's great, and life is good. Sometimes people don't like it, and you might have to turn it off. So let's first decide what smart recovery does. Some manufacturers of thermostats will call this adaptive recovery, intelligent recovery, optimal start, whatever other weird names they have for it. What that means is those thermostats look at the previous day or the previous 3 days or the previous week or whatever it is, and they say, you know what, based on what's been going on, I think it's going to take this long to heat this house up or cool it down. So I know these folks want the house to be warm when they get home at 6 p.m., so I'm going to start at 5:17 today because I know that's going to take me like probably about a half an hour to get up to temperature, right? That's what this kind of feature does. With Ecobee, it does everything like I just said, plus it keeps a profile of your home. So it doesn't just look at the past day or past 3 days. It knows a profile of your house. It knows how long it takes to heat and cool your house on a 17-degree day and a 25-degree day and a 41-degree day. It knows how long it's going to take based on the history it's been collecting on your house. Everything that the stat knows goes up to the Ecobee server, up to the Ecobee cloud, and gets stored there on your house. So it knows your house and how long it takes to heat and cool your house, which makes it predict this a little bit better. The negative to that is it has to learn your house. So if the feature's on and people are like, yeah, this feature's stupid, like I have it set for like 5 a.m. to come on in the morning for heat, but it always comes on at like 3:30 and that wakes me up, blah, blah, blah. Well, for starters, you got too loud of a furnace if it's waking you up. But secondly, it's probably just learning how long it takes, all right? And that'll change over time. It's going to do that a lot. It's going to notice, hey, you know what? It's like 15 degrees out, and I don't have any data for Ryan's house on a 15-degree day. So I'm going to go ahead and run right now just for like a little bit and just see like the trend and how long it takes me to add like a degree to the house right now. And it'll do that like in the middle of the night randomly. But then after a month or two, it pretty much has your profile built, and it doesn't need to do that anymore. So you stop noticing these weird, quirky times that it runs. Or they might look at their trend graph, which I'll show you later, and they may see everything looks normal on the trend, but then for some reason at like 2 a.m. it ran the heat for like half an hour, like randomly for no reason. You're like, why the hell did it do that? All right. It was learning. All right. And once it learns, it's going to be a little bit better, and then it's going to save you more energy if you're patient and wait for it. So a lot of people will tell you to turn it off. I'm going to tell you to leave it on. Most people have it on because they don't know it exists, and it works fine. The other thing that people need to be aware of is on their old thermostat when they programmed it, they used to set it to come on early. So if they were going to be home and in the door at 6 o'clock, they used to set it for like 5 o'clock or 4:30 to kick the heat on. So that way by the time 6 o'clock came, it was good. You no longer do that with this kind of thermostat. You need to set it for 6 o'clock. If you set it for 4:30, now it's going to kick on at like 2:45 to get to set point by 4:30 because it thinks you're coming home at 4:30. It doesn't know you really meant 6. So you have to put in the actual times you plan on walking in the door or waking up or going to bed or whatever it is. All right, we good on that stuff? I'm going to check the questions. Looks like we're okay on questions right now. Once again, type them in if you got them. Let's talk about the system modes. So as a homeowner, I can click on the system mode and change it from, heat to cool to auto and all that good stuff. Normally, you won't have to mess with this as the installer, but there are a few things that are going to come up, and you need to know where they're at because they are in this section of the stat, not in the install section. So the first one, HVAC, that one's pretty self-explanatory. Heat, cool, auto, and off are your choices. There is also one for aux if you have an auxiliary heater with a heat pump. If they put it in aux, it is not going to run the compressor heat pump. And aux, we already said, was the least efficient thing to do. So you don't want to run it in aux. You want to leave it in auto and let it make its own choice. The only time you'd put it in aux is if like your gas furnace like died or something, right? The gas valve is broke, it won't open. Well, okay. I'm sorry, opposite. The compressor died, right? And it's not running. And then I want it to force it to run the furnace or electric heat. Then I'll force it to go into aux. Other than that, you leave it in auto and let it do its thing. Fan, the default here is 0 minutes. So there's two different places the fan control gets set up, and they work together but differently. So in the schedules of the stat, when home, away, sleep, when you configure those, you tell it if you want the fan to be on, which means it runs the whole time, or auto, which means it turns on with a heat or cooling call. So for home, you'll probably put it in on and let it run the fan, right? Whereas in away, you definitely wouldn't do that because you're not home even, so you put it in auto, right, and let it do its thing that way, just like a normal thermostat would do. Then in addition to that, and unrelated to that, there's this fan timer. So what I could do here is say, I want to run the fan 15 minutes out of the hour, no matter what. Well, if the fan's already on, continuous anyway, then obviously it's already on, right? But if it's in the auto mode and it ran 30 minutes out of the hour, even though I only asked for 15 because I needed 30 minutes of heat, fine, I'm covered. But if it only ran 6 minutes of heat and I asked it on this screen right here for 15, it does the math and says, well, you asked for 15. I only gave you 6 with the W calls. So I owe you 9 minutes of fan. I'm going to go ahead and force the fan on now for 9 minutes to make sure I get at least that 15 minutes of fan runtime. And you can set this for anything you want in 5-minute increments from 0 up to 55. You can't set it for 60 minutes. I don't know why. That would solve so many confusion points. If you want to run it 60 minutes out of the hour, you have to basically tell it to run continuous on fan in the schedule. But you can tell it to do any of those. The reasons you would do this are, 1, code compliance. If you have an outside air ventilation intake duct and you need it to be running X amount of minutes to get the ventilation air that you have, that's a whole other discussion we could talk about separately. But you could do that here. Or maybe they got some really nice indoor air quality air purifier. They got a Bryant Evolution air purifier or a Respicare or whatever it is. And you want to make sure that you have the fan running, because if the fan's not running, then it's basically not sending anything into my house. So what's the point? I can go in here and make sure the fan runs a certain amount of minutes out of the hour. Now, if you run it all the minutes out of the hour, right, run it continuously, obviously the IAQ devices are going to do better in that case. But maybe you have an old PSC fan and you don't want to pay to run it all that time. So you say, you know what? I'm just going to run it 20 minutes and we're going to call it a day. So this is where you can do that kind of thing. Now, I will caution you about running the fan continuously or running it on this timer. For years, people have told you, even people at my own office, that you should just run, every house should run the fan continuously because it helps move the air around the house and helps balance out the rooms and keep upstairs and downstairs not being extreme from each other. And that can, in fact, be true. However, what I want to caution you on is the duct system, especially the return duct. If they are using building cavities as the return and they don't have a sheet metal duct, or if they do have sheet metal return ducts and they're not sealed very tight, which almost none of them are unless they're built in the past like 8 years or unless they were aero sealed. If they're not sealed tight, you're going to be sucking in whatever air of the space they're in. So if the duct is running through your attic and you run the fan continuously, you're sucking in hot, humid air all the time for no reason. Or if it's running through your crawl space, you could be sucking in cool, clammy air all the time for no reason. Or whatever dust and debris is in your attic and fiberglass particles in your attic and squirrel poop and whatever else is in there. So unless the ductwork is sealed and tight, you definitely don't want to run the fan more than you have to run the fan. Once you seal the ductwork up and it's all snug, then if you want to have discussions about running the fan to get better turnover between the rooms and to let your indoor air quality devices work better and all that, then I'm right there with you. But make sure the ductwork is sealed before you have that discussion with someone. Otherwise, it's going to be a pretty big energy waste, especially on the humidity side. Below the fan setting is the humidifier setting. For whatever reason, it's defaulted off. I don't understand why. You just bought a humidifier, you installed it, you configured the stat for a humidifier, but it's defaulted to be off. So you have to come into this screen and either set it for on which means it's going to run and it's going to ask you what set point you want. You're going to say, I want 27% or whatever it is, and life is good. Or you're going to put it on frost control, which means it's going to go on and off with its own outside air reference, right? We talked about that last week when we were talking about adding a humidifier, and we told it on the install screens how good the window was. Remember, we had the setting from 1 to 7 on how good the window is, right? 1 meaning it's a really, really crappy window, 7 meaning it's a phenomenal window. So when you put it on frost control, it'll then use those settings 1 through 7. And if you click it on frost control here, the customer, I should have did a screenshot of it, but the customer will have the ability to slide that bar between 1 and 7 if they want to make it something different than what you made it on the install setting. By the way, this picture here is my house, and this is I think it was like a 15 or 20 degree day, and I don't have a humidifier. I have so much natural humidity in my house just from like my kids and stuff that it always condenses on my windows when it's cold out. So because of that and a few other reasons, I threw my humidifier away. I don't need it. Maybe when all my kids move out someday, maybe I'll need to add a humidifier again. But not every house needs a humidifier. Old leaky houses that people don't want to seal up tight, yeah, they need a humidifier. My house from 20 years ago doesn't need a humidifier. Below the humidifier section is the humidity section. So even though I don't have a humidifier in this example, if I did, I'd have to configure a dehumidification set point for that. But in this case, I don't have a dehumidifier because I wired up a humidifier. And remember, the Ecobee 5 can only do one or the other. But I did tell it I wanted to do the AC overcool max. And I told it 3 degrees max, if you recall from last week. If I told it that, I still have to come in here and turn this on. I don't understand why. As an installer, I just told you I wanted to do it. But then I have to come back in here as a homeowner, or you have to do it for the homeowner, which is the best way. Come back in here. It's going to say off. You need to switch it to on and set it for some percentage. If you don't know what to set it for, I'd say set it for 54%. So 100% of your projects, I would turn on AC overcool max, set it for 3 degrees, come in here and turn this on and set it for 54%. Every single one. No exception to that. If it doesn't need to dehumidify the house, then it won't kick on. And if it does, which it will, then it kicks on and helps dehumidify the house, and life is good. The reason I picked 54%, I'd like to pick 55%, but that's not a number on here. You can only do even numbers, so I had to pick 54. But the reason I would have picked 55, ASHRAE standard 55 for human thermal comfort recommends we keep the humidity below 60%. ASHRAE standard 62 for indoor air quality recommends we keep it below 65% for mold growth prevention. And if you follow anything lately going on with coronavirus, they're recommending we keep things between 40 and 60%. So if I look at that, at 60%, 60%, and 65% are the 3 recommendations that I'm getting from ASHRAE on the maximum humidity I should ever have inside a home. So because of that, I want to pick the lower of those 3 numbers, which is 60. And on a previous screen, if you recall, I set it up for 5% hysteresis. So if I set it for 55%, or in my case, 54%, it'll be allowed to float up as high as 59%, just right below that 60, before it kicks on the dehumidification function. Now, it's going to run the dehumidification mode, which means I'm going to energize Y1, and I'm going to run cooling, even though I didn't need any cooling, right? I have a 74 degree set point. It's 74 in the house. I'm perfectly happy, but my humidity got up above 59%, so kick on Y1 anyway. It's going to run that until either A, I hit the heating set point if I'm in the auto mode, or B, I go more than 3 degrees below the cooling set point because that's what I had selected, 3 degrees max overcool. So in my case, 71 degrees because I had a 74 degree cooling set point. Or C, it'll shut off when I hit the 54%. One of those 3 things is when it'll shut off. Or you rip the stat off the wall. That'll do it. Dude, I don't even know what this screen was for. These screens are identical. I don't know. I'm not sure why I made another screen like this. Oh, maybe because I had to scroll up a little bit just to see what they recommended, which was their recommendation was 60%. My recommendation is 54%. All right, the sensor settings. Also kind of a homeowner-ish thing, but you might have to either A, teach them how to do it, or B, do it for them the first time, especially if you're installing the sensors. So under the sensor settings, there's a couple different things on there, and it won't always look like this because there's a new feature on the Ecobee app called Eco Plus, and Eco Plus in the app takes over control of some of these things. Some homeowners will have Eco Plus and some homeowners won't have Eco Plus. When you first install the stat, it'll look like this because they won't have the app yet, and obviously it won't be doing anything with the app. But if you're servicing one later on, some of these features like Smart Home Away may no longer be on the stat, and they may be built into the app, and they may have more functionality associated with them. But let's keep it simple and just do it from here. Smart Home Away, like we talked about previously, that is where it uses the occupancy sensor, which on the Ecobee 5 is built in right here, or it's built into the remote sensors. It'll use the occupancy sensor to decide if you're home or not home. And it'll switch you between home and away set points accordingly. The next one below that is Follow Me. You can enable that. So if I disable it, then what it'll do is it'll look at all of the sensors and it'll average all the sensor temperatures. If I enable it and turn it on, Follow Me feature, it'll only average the sensors in the house that are detecting occupancy. So let's just say you have one thermostat and one sensor. The thermostat's downstairs in the family room, the sensor's upstairs in your bedroom. You're hanging out in the family room watching TV. There's nobody in the bedroom. It'll control to the family room temperature, and it'll completely ignore upstairs. It won't care at all about upstairs in any way whatsoever. But then when you leave downstairs and you go upstairs to go to bed, it'll see that you're up there and that no one's downstairs, and hence it'll control the upstairs, and who cares what happens downstairs. And then if you go to bed, but your wife stays downstairs, it'll see that both sensors are occupied, and it'll average the two in that case. That's what the Follow Me feature does. It averages occupied sensors instead of averaging all sensors. In addition to that, there's other settings on here. So if I clicked on any one of my sensors that I've added, on each one of them, I can tell, I don't know what screenshots I have on here. I can tell it which profiles it applies to. Home, away, and sleep. So I have those 3 schedules that I've already set up as a homeowner on the temperatures that I like when I'm home and when I'm away and when I'm sleeping. And then I can pick which sensors I want to be involved in that. And I can do that independent of or in conjunction with the Follow Me feature. So I can say, you know what, when I'm in the sleep schedule, only look at the upstairs bedroom sensor. I don't care about anything else. And right, when I'm in the home schedule, only look at the downstairs. I don't care about anything else. You could do that. Or you could say when I'm in the sleep schedule, only look at my 3 sensors that are upstairs in my 3 bedrooms and ignore all the other sensors. So you can pick and choose which sensors you want to be active when. Each schedule, home, away, and sleep, has to have at least one sensor associated with it. There are 2 places you can make these changes. You can do it where we're doing it now under sensors. I can click on one of the sensors and tell it which schedule it applies to. Or when I'm in the scheduling screens, the home, away, and sleep screens, there I can tell it which sensors apply to that schedule. I can do it either way, and it'll make the change on both screens. I can also change the name of the sensor. You definitely want to do that. Leaving it at the default of the serial number of the sensor is not helpful to anyone. So make this one master bed, make the other one fam room, right? Name them whatever you need to name them so people know where the hell they're at. All right, the reminders and alerts on these thermostats. How are we on time? We're halfway through. We're good. All right, so let's talk about setting these up. When you go into the reminders and alerts tab, which is also kind of homeowner-ish, but there's a couple settings in there that you probably want to change before they even use the stat. So there's 3 tabs on there. 2 of them are just read-only. You can read any reminders you have, dirty filter, change your UV bulb, etc. And you can read any alerts you have, temperatures out of set point range, whatever, right? The third one, preferences, is the one where you set all that stuff up. So that's what we're going to click on is preferences. Oh, I got a screenshot here showing what the reminder looks like. So this is one of the HVAC reminders. If I had clicked on it, it would have said it's time to service your heating and cooling system, because one of the reminders happens to be just an alarm basically that goes off every 6 months that tells you when it's time to have your cleaning check done. And then it says call whatever Jenny's Heating at 867-5309, right? And it has your little information there and your logo and all that stuff. We'll talk about getting your information on the stat later on. Actually, we'll talk about it right now. To get your information on the stat, there are 2 ways to do that. One, you become an official Ecobee dealer, get access to the Ecobee contractor portal, and set all your stuff up on there. And then when you install the customer stats, you add the serial number of the customer stat to your contractor portal, and then that marries the 2 of those things together. And then when your customer sees these screens, it has your contact info on there. That's one way to do it. And that's the way you'd want to do it for most HVAC companies. However, if you're a Bryant dealer or if you're a Carrier dealer, you don't want to do it that way. Instead, you want to do it on the Bryant Carrier portal instead of the Ecobee contractor portal. Why would we want to do that? Well, on the Ecobee portal, you will only see Ecobee thermostats as a contractor. But on the Carrier and Bryant portals and HVAC partners, you will see Ecobee thermostats, plus you will see Infinity and Evolution thermostats, plus you will see Housewise and Core thermostats. So all of the ones on this screen you will see. And additionally, believe it or not, and not officially, you can also add ion controls in there. I just did it with one of the stats in my lab, and it does in fact work. So all these stats that are pictured on this screen, plus probably an ion stat, which unofficially is not the answer, but it probably would work as well. And if you're a Carrier dealer, you can see Bryant stats and vice versa. There's no problem with that. So you want to do it on the contractor portal in HVAC Partners instead of on the Ecobee one. Now, with that being said, you may still want to contact Ecobee. You may still want to request to be an Ecobee dealer and just not add any stats to the site. The reason being is on thermostats, if there's not a dealer paired up through one of these portals and the customer goes to the dealer's screen on their portal, the consumer portal, it'll ask them if they want to pick a dealer and it'll give them a drop down. It only puts in right now, contractors that are Ecobee contractors on the drop down. And obviously you want your name there because it's free marketing. Why would you not? Eventually, the carrier contractors and Bryant contractors are supposed to show up in the Ecobee portal. They don't yet, but eventually they're supposed to. But in the meantime, request to Ecobee to become a dealer so your information gets listed on random people's thermostats if they're looking for a dealer. But don't add any thermostats to that portal. Add them all to your Bryant and Carrier portal. That's a lot to say. Hopefully it's not overly confusing. Did that make sense? When you log into the connected portal on HVAC Partners, you will see all of your thermostats that your customers have that you've connected. Now, supposedly, when you do things like register somebody's thermostat for an extended warranty or register it for some kind of cool cash or Bryant bonus rebate, those kind of things, it's supposed to then say, oh, there's this serial number of this thermostat and it's associated with this contractor on this form we have. They must be buddied up. Let's go ahead and add to that guy's portal. That's supposed to happen. I don't think it happens very fast or very well. So my recommendation to you is just add all your thermostats. Every time you have an Infinity, Evolution, Core, Housewise, Ecobee thermostat, take the serial number, add it into your portal. All right. You can even do that before the stat's installed. Maybe you got an inventory and you bought 12 Ecobee thermostats on a preseason buy and they're sitting on your shelf there at the shop. You can take those off, look at the side of the box, punch in those 12 serial numbers on your portal, and they'll be ready to go. They'll be in this queued section because they're not actually powered up and connected to a customer yet. They're kind of just waiting there. It's like, yeah, this is John's Heating's. He's the contractor, but we don't know the homeowner yet, so we'll put them in the queued section. And then once the customer has the stat powered up and on Wi-Fi, then it'll move from queued over to connected the next day. So you can add those as soon as you want. I would say that's the best way to do it. If you can grab the serial numbers off the ones in your inventory, great. I would also tell all your technicians, if you're an office person listening in today, tell all your technicians to bring back the serial number for you. Take a picture of it or whatever. That way you can make sure it's added that way. Because sometimes it may not come into your inventory. The technician may pick it up at TEC when they pick up the furnace, and it may never have crossed into your building, and hence you never got a chance to see the serial number. A lot of you guys have the serial numbers of all the stuff that you put onto your on your work tickets anyway, so it's not a big deal, but not everybody does it that way. This is what it looks like when you do it. When you're on the contractor portal, you'll obviously log in HVAC Partners. You'll navigate to contractor portal. You'll click on customers, and then you'll click on add new control. And it'll ask you what the serial number is. And that's all you have to do. That's all you have to punch in is the serial number. However, that just gets the customer's thermostat to show up on here. And when I click on it, I can see that I have this thermostat. It's an Ecobee 5, and it belongs to Mrs. Smith, and her phone number is 8675309. But I can't see any data on her thermostat, which is kind of boring. On the customer's end, when they log into the customer portal, so there's two portals we're talking about now. There's actually more than that, but there's two for right now. There's the contractor portal and the homeowner portal. When the customer logs into their thermostat in the homeowner portal, which is the same login and password that they use for their homeowner app, and they navigate to the About section, they have to click on the My Contractor tab. And if you click on Contractor, it'll show the name of their contractor. And if they don't have a contractor, like I mentioned before, that's when they would see a drop-down box to pick a contractor. But below that is what my contractor can see. These two boxes are not checked. Just like Infinity Evolution stuff, the factory at Ecobee makes the assumption that homeowners don't want contractors seeing their private stuff, so they make the homeowner check the box to say that it's cool. So you want to tell your customers, or sit there with them when they're training them how to use the website, which you should be doing, to check these two boxes so that information can then show up on the contractor side and you can help them. It would be wonderful as a contractor if I could walk in the morning, log into my portal, and see that I have 2 of my 160 thermostats have some kind of issue going on. And I could proactively call those homeowners. Hey, Mrs. Jones, we happen to notice you have a problem with your thermostat, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. We're in Florida on vacation. Well, geez, I don't know. Your thermostat says it's like 45 degrees in your house. Holy crap, right? So they're going to send their brother-in-law over there and to meet you, and you're going to fix it, right? That kind of thing. You can also set it up to get emails of the alerts instead of just logging into the website too. All right. Hopefully that all made sense. Still under the reminders and alert section, under preferences, these are the different things that I can set up, right? So, so the first one is an HVAC maintenance reminder. This is just a generic timer. So let's say I install somebody's furnace and AC today. I probably want to come back in March to do a clean and check on the cooling system, or to do a startup on the cooling system, or whatever it is that I need to do. So I'm going to set that to go off 6 months from now, right? And then I'll probably set it off to go 6 months again, and so on. It's a pretty cool feature. It just pops up like I showed you before and says, call Jenny's Heating, blah, blah, blah. Now, with that being said, if the consumer is on a maintenance contract with your dealership, do not put any timer in here, because you don't want the customer to get a reminder from the thermostat when whatever May 19th comes along. I want the customer to get scheduled with me, the dealer, for my maintenance when I pick. So if they're on a maintenance contract with me, I want my dispatcher or whoever deciding which customers are happening when. So if I want to go to see this customer and do their maintenance on May 31st, but on May 19th they're getting alarms, that's going to be annoying, right? Or I want to go see them and do the clean and check in, I don't know, April 10th, and they're getting alarms on March 10th. I don't want that to happen. So if they're on a maintenance account, turn this feature off. If they're not on a maintenance account, set it up. Take your educated guess on the next time they should call you to be out there, and set it for that. The furnace filter, that could be a monthly timer, 1 month, 2 months, 10 months, 6 months, whatever. Or it could be a fan run hour timer. You could do it either way. When you first click on it, it'll just show you the months, and then you got to scroll down lower to get to the fan run timer. I'm not a fan of these. I really like the ones we have in Infinity Evolution because it measures static pressure and tells me when the filter is truly dirty. I like that. I don't like fan timers for filters because it's kind of like, I don't know. So let's say I pick 3 months. Well, 3 months running in the winter is a lot more runtime than 3 months running in the fall because I'm running the heat a lot more, right? So I'd want to pick the hourly timer, but I just don't know how many hours it should be. So I don't really have a good gauge of that. So you can make these things work if you kind of massage them and play with them. Basically, you have to keep checking the filter to see when it actually looks dirty, or put a differential pressure sensor across there, your manometer, and measure when it's dirty, and then try to kind of get, well, it took 6.5 months to get dirty, so I'm going to set this thing to go off in 6 months. Kind of a pain. Humidifier filter. This is a humidifier pad. I don't know why they call it a humidifier filter. I've asked them several times to change it to humidifier pad. I think they just think that the word filter is more logical to the homeowner. So that's why they leave it there, because the homeowner doesn't know what a pad is. In any case, you can set this to go off whenever you want. Once again, it could be timers of months or timers of fan run hours. I would pick months, and I would set it so it's going to go off like in May sometime. Now, once again, if they're on a maintenance contract, you're not doing this. We're going to change the filter, change the humidifier. I see now I said it. Change the humidifier pad, not filter, when we want to change it on our maintenance schedule that we've already promised you. But if they're not on a maintenance account, then you do want to set this up. I would have it go off in like, May or something like that. I know the logic historically has been to do your humidifier pad change in September or October, right before it's time to use the humidifier. But I think that's disgusting, because the humidifier pads, as you guys all know, when you take them out, they're kind of gross. Why would I want that gross pad sitting there for all the summer months with letting air blow across it with its grossness? Now, let's take it out in May, put a new fresh one in. Even though the humidifier never run perfect, it'll stay nice and dry and clean all summer long, and then it'll be ready to go for the fall. So that's what I would prefer to do. UV lamp, this is just a timer. Typically, most UV bulbs are 12 months. If you have a PCO air purifier, or you have an Oxy 4, or any other bulb-based thing in the duct, you can use this timer for that function as well. It's just going to go off after X amount of months, probably 12 months. Now, I normally set it for 11 months, because if you're like me, after 11 months it goes off, and I basically hit snooze for a while, like I do every morning, before I actually do anything about it. So I set mine for 11 months, and then I eventually get around to it, hopefully by the 12th month. Below that, we have alerts for temperature and humidity. So these are pretty easy to figure out, but I do have some recommendations for you. So for the, it's too far. So for the low temp alert, what I normally set this for is 5 degrees colder than whatever the coldest heating set point I expect to have is. So if I'm going to normally heat the house to 70 degrees, and when I'm away schedule, I'm going to heat it to 65, then I'm going to put my alarm at 60 degrees. If I only heat it to 60 when I'm away, I'm going to alarm at 55 degrees. 5 degrees away from whatever my coldest set point is what I'm going to set it for. I do that because I want them to be right at each other, because then if any little blip happens and I happen to get a 1/10 of a degree below it on accident, then I'm going to get this nuisance alarm. Once it's 5 degrees below, okay, this is a real problem. My heat obviously is not working, or my kid propped the door open, one of the two. Same thing on the high temp side. If you're going to set it to be 80 degrees when you're away, alarm it at 85. Low humidity alert, I almost always set this for 10%. You can set it higher. The problem with that is most people are going to use the frost control, which means they're going to have a low humidity set point when it's a 0 or 10 degree day. So it's going to get below 10%, or get down near 10%. It shouldn't get below 10% though. So I usually set it for 10%. If it goes below 10%, that probably means my humidifier is not working. Now, if they don't own a humidifier, I still set it for 10%. Why do I do that? Well, because I want them to get the alarm that pops up when it's 9% humidity in their house. I want them to get annoyed by that. I want them to call me and say, hey, you have the stat you installed last year? Like, it's telling me that my humidity is only 9%. What the hell is that all about? Oh, well, let me look it up. Oh, it looks like you didn't take the humidifier option we offered you last year, but it's really dry in your house. You may want to consider adding a humidifier. Would you like us to send you a quote again? And they're going to say yes, or they're going to say no. If they say no, all right, would you like me to tell you how to turn the alert off so you don't see it anymore? If they say yes, great. When can I schedule you? Right, just a sales opportunity for your customer service rep. Now, I'm not going to set it at like 50% or something crazy just to force them to call me when they don't really need it. But if it gets down to 10 or 15%, they really do need a humidifier. So it's a legitimate thing. High humidity alert. Normally, if I'm the one that sized the system, which usually I'm not because I'm not the contractor, but once in a while I do size someone's system. If I'm the one that sized the system, then I'm going to set this high humidity alert for 65%. Right? If I'm controlling it at 54, which allows it to get up to 59 before it forces my dehumidification mode on, there's no reason it should get up to 65%. Plus 65% is already the threshold I told you from ASHRAE when they start getting concerned about mold growth in cavities and stuff like that. So I'm going to set it for 65%. The problem is most systems, as you've heard me preach before, are grossly oversized. So getting under 65% is really hard to do. So at that point in time, you're going to have to make a choice. If you're not the one that installed this system and you're just servicing them, or you just installed the thermostat and it's an existing cooling system, I would set it at 65. I would let the alarm go off. And when they call me out on it, I would say, well, you should never have it above 65%. That's not safe. It's bad for human comfort. It causes indoor air quality issues. Mold growth could thrive. We got to solve that. What do we do to solve it? Well, we need to take a look at resizing your system, or we need to change the fan speed on your system, or we need to add a dehumidifier, which I would never say that, but someone might. I need to find a solution for you. No, I'm not doing any of that stuff, man. Oh, okay. Would you like me to tell you how to turn the alarm message off so you don't see it anymore? And I tell them how to turn it off. All right. Just creates an opportunity to solve their problem that they know they have a comfort problem. They don't know it's humidity driven. Display the alerts on the thermostat. This is defaulted to enable, and I would leave that on normally. What this does is whenever there's an alarm that gets emailed out, it also shows up on the thermostat along with the contractor info. Usually you want that to happen. There are some times you want to turn it off. When do you want to turn it off? If this is not a homeowner occupied situation, it's a rental thing, you may want to turn it off. If it's like an Airbnb type place, definitely turn it off, right? Because if the people that are renting the place are seeing all these alarms on the thermostat, even though they may be totally comfortable, they start seeing like filter alarms and other stuff on there. It's just an excuse for them later on to complain about something or tell the homeowner they want a discount because, wow, you know, the thing said it was, you know, high humidity, whatever. Yeah, well, dude, you rented a condo in Florida. What did you think was going to happen? So I would not show it in those kind of rental situations, but if it's homeowner occupied, definitely show it. You can't really see it. It kind of got cut off there. Enable heating cooling alerts. Turn that on as well. This is a really cool feature where because the thermostat knows how long it takes to heat and cool your house at various outdoor air temperatures, remember we're trending that and collecting it into the cloud. Because it knows that, it also knows if something's not right. So if it's calling for heating and the space is not actually getting warmer or it's barely getting warmer, after a certain amount of hours, it's going to flag that and it's going to tell you. So you'll get it every once in a while, you get an email that says, yeah, we've been trying to run heat at your house for 3 hours and the temperature actually went down 0.5 degree. We think you have a heating problem. Call Jenny's Heating at 867-5309. Right? So you definitely want to enable that feature. People might think everything's okay because it's mild outside, right? And yeah, it's been calling for heat and the temperature didn't really go up, but it's not that cold, so you don't really notice. So then what are they going to do? Wait for 3 more weeks when it's really, really cold, and then they find out their furnace doesn't work correctly, and then they call you when it's an emergency, right? So we'd rather have them call you now, earlier on in the season. So turn that feature on. If they have auxiliary heat, we can enable some other features on there in addition to the ones I just told you. So only if they have a heat pump with auxiliary heat. So for example, there's this one here, auxiliary heat runtime. In this case, set it for 3 hours. If the auxiliary heat has to run for 3 hours, that probably means the heat pump is not doing his part of the story, right? Because when it's really cold outside, I want the heat pump to run and the electric auxiliary heat to run with it. So if the auxiliary heat's been calling for 3 hours, either the auxiliary heat's broke or the compressor heat's broke. One of the two is not getting it done, right? Or it's freakish polar vortex day, and I'm the one person who didn't have an oversized heating system, right? How many times can I mention oversizing in 1 hour-and-a-half webinar when it's not even about that? Okay. Oh, we already talked about those two, so we're good. This is an example of what the alarm messages might look like. There's 2 different versions of these messages. This is the homeowner version. If the stat's also connected to you, the contractor, on the Ecobee or the Bryant Carrier contractor portals, you will also get this same message. It'll just be worded a little bit differently. It'll say, your customer so-and-so at this address has this such and such problem. Whereas this message says, hey, you have such and such problem. Here's the info for your contractor. So the alert message is the same, or the reminder message is the same, whatever you want to call it, but the contact info is different. Either they're telling the homeowner to contact Jenny's Heating, or they're telling the people over at Jenny's Heating to call John Doe, the homeowner, right? This is that one I was telling you about. So this one that said, hey, for the past 2 hours, we've been calling for heat, and the temperature went down 3 degrees. There's not any fixed number on this. Sometimes I'll see them where it's 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, but it's usually either a short number of time with a big temperature drop, or it's a long amount of time with a little bit of temperature drop happening, or no temperature increase, or mild temperature increase. So kind of trying to gauge the problem there. It's a proprietary thing. You just turn it on or off. You don't get to say how it works. All right, more questions. Let me see if anybody typed anything in. They have not. We have 20 minutes left, which is good. We're on time. All right, so adding a thermostat to the consumer app or consumer portal. I know a lot of contractors want to avoid this for all the thermostats they work on. I think that's kind of, it's kind of weak, really. They basically, as a homeowner, it tells me you don't know anything about it, which scares me that you don't know anything about it. Granted, you may be the genius on furnaces and AC and boilers and whatever else, but you don't understand the thermostat, which, okay, you don't understand the thermostat. A lot of guys don't. But as a homeowner, that's all I see is the thermostats. The fact that you're not teaching me how to use it is annoying. So please take the time to learn how to use the app. Please take the time to show the homeowner how to use the app, right? The more of them you do, the easier it'll get. Additionally, you're going to probably have to use the app. As soon as they have remote sensors, you're going to have to use the app to add remote sensors to the thermostat. It's the only way to do it right now. So you're going to have to learn how to use it somehow. Let's talk about it from a brief standpoint. So on the thermostat, one of the settings on there is to set up the Wi-Fi. When you click on the thermostat to set up Wi-Fi, or set up registration. If you haven't done Wi-Fi, it'll push you into the Wi-Fi section. You can either skip setting up Wi-Fi, which doesn't really help you. The reason that option is there is because when you're first doing the initial setup with a thermostat, after you tell it, yeah, I have 2-stage heat, 2-stage cool, I have a humidifier, blah, 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 one of the things it says is, do you want to set up the Wi-Fi right now? And you could do it right then and there. And as a homeowner, you probably would. But as a contractor, you probably wouldn't, because you probably don't know the Wi-Fi password at that point in time. So you're probably going to say skip it, and then you're going to come back to it later when all the HVAC stuff is done and this thing is all installed and powered up and ready to go. Then you're going to come back to the Wi-Fi. Now, 2 recommendations for you. If you are the CSR, I know a couple people on this call are the CSR at the office or the dispatcher. When you're scheduling these installations, ask the homeowner about the Wi-Fi then. Believe it or not, a lot of homeowners don't know their Wi-Fi password. I know that's shocking, right? You probably don't know yours either. Ask them about it then. Say, hey, this thermostat that you bought is a Wi-Fi connected stat. When Johnny's out there installing it for you tomorrow, if you have the Wi-Fi password available for him, he'll set all that up for you. Oh, I don't know what my Wi-Fi password is. Well, if you could find it by tomorrow, that'd be great. You know, ask whoever set it up at your house what it is, right? So that's a good point. Or if you're the guy installing it, you're going to be spending the next 4 hours there doing a furnace and thermostat install. Tell the homeowner when you first arrive, hey, I'm going to be setting it up. This is how the day's going to go, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I see you bought the Wi-Fi Ecobee thermostat. I'm going to need the Wi-Fi password in order to help you set that up. So if you can hunt that down this morning at some point in time, that would be great. And then they already hunt it down, and it saves you time later. All right. Enough of me rambling about that. If you click select Wi-Fi network, it'll be like everything else in your life. It'll say, hey, here's a list of Wi-Fi networks in the area. Which one is yours? Oh, mine is the one that says 956Z19. Why'd you call it that? I don't know. And then what is your password, right? So you'll pick it from a drop-down list, and then you'll put the password in, just like when you connect your cell phone or your laptop or whatever to a Wi-Fi network. The other choice you could do is if you don't know the Wi-Fi password or the homeowner doesn't know it, you can use the iPhone section, and if there's already an iPhone or other iDevice connected to that homeowner's Wi-Fi, the iPhone can push the password into the thermostat without you ever seeing or knowing the password. Now, in order for that to happen, the customer has to have an iPhone, and the iPhone has to be on the same Wi-Fi network as the thermostat, or the thermostat's going to go on. It can't be your iPhone as the installer because you're not on their Wi-Fi. It has to be their iPhone, right, or their kid's iPad or whatever. Right? So you can do that if you want to. I do that in a lot of places. Like when I go somewhere with my kids, if I've been on the Wi-Fi network somewhere and they haven't, and they ask me for the password, instead of me trying to look up the password, I just push it from my phone to my kid's phone. Right? So I went to the wrestling gym just 2 days ago. My kid wanted to stream something while we were there, whatever it was, music or something. And so I just pushed it from my phone to his, and neither one of us knows what the password is anymore. I forgot it a long time ago. They need to download the app. The customer does. From the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, one of the two. They need to download that have it on their device before they go ahead and set it up. If they have an iPhone, an Android, a tablet, they'd be doing it this way. If they're on a computer, they wouldn't be doing it with an app. They'd be going to a website. Brian asked the question, what features will not be usable without Wi-Fi? So without Wi-Fi, the features that won't work as well are the ones that relate to outdoor air temperature and data trending. So a heat pump would be a problem without Wi-Fi, because the heat pump with the auxiliary heat, I need to know the outdoor temperature to know when to switch between the auxiliary heat and regular heat. So I have to have Wi-Fi because I need the outdoor temperature for a heat pump. If you had a gas heating system with AC, you don't really need the outdoor temperature. It's nice to have it, but you don't need it. The humidifier reset won't work. You can still run the humidifier. You just can't use the frost control window protection feature. You can run it in a straight up mode. The smart recovery will still work. It just won't work as well because it won't be able to store a profile of your house online and hence be smarter and smarter about the smart recovery. So you'll have dumb recovery, I guess. You'll always be able to do some basic heating and cooling function. So if they have Wi-Fi and it's all working, everything's great, and the stat's wonderful, but for some reason they lose Wi-Fi, if that's your question, Brian, that's not the end of the world because everything will still function. I'll still get heat. I'll still get cooling. I just won't get any of the extra features. Now, if they plan on never having Wi-Fi, then you probably shouldn't even give them an Ecobee stat. Like, it's the wrong kind of stat to have, because literally all the cool stuff is related to Wi-Fi. Like, I don't know why you would want Ecobee without Wi-Fi. So if you're asking about what happens if Wi-Fi fails, don't worry. Things can run in a crude fashion in the meantime. If you're asking about what if they don't even own a Wi-Fi network at their house, then Ecobee is probably not for them. The other time that question comes up is on new construction, right? You may be doing new construction, installing the stat, and they're not going to have Wi-Fi for like 6 more months or whatever, right? That's fine. Once again, it'll have to just run in a basic regular thermostat mode. Although personally, if it was me, I would put a cheap thermostat on the wall and wait until the homeowner's almost moved in before I put the good stat on the wall. Just because I don't want it getting full of drywall dust or getting smacked around and hit with ladders, et cetera, et cetera. So I've got to have the app in order to use this. When they open up the app, they can either log into the app, which is what they normally would do, but the very first time they don't do that, they click create a new account. Once again, they can do this on the app or they can do it on the website. Either way is fine. And once you have an account on the app, you automatically have one for the website and vice versa. It'll be the same login. So create a new account. It's going to ask you what you're actually adding. In our case, we'll be adding a thermostat because we're HVAC people. It'll ask you thermostat, switch, remote room sensor, which I might be doing if I'm adding a remote room sensor onto that thermostat. And then now it also asks you if you're adding a camera because they came out with cameras this summer. On the thermostat side, after I connect to the Wi-Fi, the next thing the thermostat will tell me is this 4-digit code. I take the 4-digit code from the thermostat and I punch it here on the app, and that's what pairs the two things together, right? So I created a new account. It asked me what my name, my email address is, right? And what I want my password to be. Then it said, what are you adding? I'm adding a thermostat. What's the code off the thermostat? I put it in, hit next, and now it's bonded these two things together. That thermostat now belongs to this customer's app. Now there's a second app that's involved and a second registration process that's involved if you want to. If you have the Ecobee 5, which is the Ecobee Smart Thermostat Pro that we were talking about, or you have the Ecobee 4, which is now obsolete, those two have Alexa built into them. So when you set those up, it's automatically going to ask you after you've connected it to the Ecobee app if you'd also like to connect it to your Alexa app, right? Then you'll be able to use it as an Alexa Echo or Alexa Dot, where you can have it play music and you can ask it recipe questions and whatever other weird things you want to ask your Alexa that's built into the back of your thermostat. You can ask it to bump up and down the temperature verbally. You can do those kind of things. So you can set that up here as well at the same time. The customer can anyway. If you already, or if they already, I should say, have an Amazon account, they would log into it. If they don't have one, they can click the create an account button. Almost everybody has an Amazon account at this point, especially the kind of people that would buy a thermostat like this. You don't have to have anything special. You don't need to like Amazon Prime or anything like that. Just a regular free Amazon account works. Obviously, you get less stuff, right? You can't like do online ordering from your thermostat unless you have Amazon. Well, I guess you probably could. You could do it actually without Prime, but you wouldn't get the free shipping. But you can, anyway, you can set this up right now if you want to. Once you've got the stat added to the Amazon account, you'd also would have to on there tell it you want to use the Ecobee skill for the Amazon account. For you guys that are doing or still have out there Bryant Housewise or Carrier Original Core, the one that looks like the Housewise, those are made by Ecobee and they run on Ecobee's server platform. If you had those, you could also add those to Amazon and download the skill for those. Now, those don't have a speaker built into them, right? But you can still run them with a regular Amazon speaker. Same thing with an Ecobee 3 Lite. If you happen to have that stat, you can still add it to an Amazon account. You can still boss it around. You can still tell it to raise and drop your set points, but it doesn't have a microphone and speaker built into it, so you need a separate Amazon Alexa device to do that. The app looks like the thermostat. So there's a good and bad to that, obviously. If you like the way the thermostat works, then you're going to love the app and vice versa. They look the same as each other. They navigate the same. You slide the same thing up and down to change the set points. The buttons are all the same. So it's really nice in that regard. Now, the app won't have everything on it. For example, all the installation settings that we set up before, you're not going to find those on the app. No one's going to be able to go in and tell it, oh, I don't have one stage of cooling, I have two from the app. They want you to be physically at the thermostat if you make major changes like that. But normal homeowner type changes like set points and schedules and all that kind of stuff, you can do all of that from the app. And you'll navigate the same as the thermostat. You can also, if you want to, register the thermostat on a web browser instead of doing it on an app. Most homeowners are probably going to do it on an app. But once again, the logins will be the same. If you log into one, you can log into the other, same deal. And it walks you through the same kind of process. You know, what are you installing? What's the 4-digit code and all of that. There are some times that you have to use the desktop version. Specifically, the Home IQ function has to be done from a desktop or from a tablet with a large screen and a web browser, but it can never be done through the app. Now, even though the screens were mirror imaged here between the app and the stat, they're not exactly mirror imaged on the web browser version. It kind of is over here. I mean, as far as, you know, sliding the slide bar for temperature and changing the fan, that kind of stuff is the same. But other stuff, instead of being buried in little tiny menus down here, is off over here on the side. So if you want to change your schedules and stuff like that, you click over here on schedules. So it does look a little bit different. The Home IQ button is the cool thing on here, and that's why you would go to the web browser, really, so you can see the trend graphs. Here, let's do this real quick. Let's take a small detour. All right, can you guys see my web browser? Let's see. You should be able to see. Okay, so this is just one of our accounts. This happens to be the room that I'm sitting in. So when I look at this at a quick view, it's telling me that this particular thermostat has 2 sensors on it. Its set points are 72 and 75. It is in the smart home function. What happened? Oh, I timed out. It's in the smart home function because it should be scheduled away, but I happen to be in this office today, so it figured that out and it changed to put things into occupied mode. When I click on that guy, I'll see all the stuff I was just showing you a second ago. All right, so I can go change my reminders and alerts and preferences and all those same things we just talked about. If I wanted to add a second email address to get an alarm, I could do that. Okay, I'm logging back in now. Never do anything live. It's always a bad idea. I logged in like 2 hours ago and let it sit here. Let's see if they'll let me go into it. All right, so when I click on Home IQ, I told it my thermostat, man, why am I not logged in? I told it my thermostat is a commercial building, so it doesn't do any of these tracking things over here. But if it was a home, it would track your runtime history and compare it to people that have similar homes as you. And it asks you what kind of house you have. Is it 1-story or 2-story? How many people live here? What's the square footage, right? It already knows your zip code. What's going on, man? It's killing me, Smalls. So it would have that stuff there. In my case, I'm just going to use it for the system monitor data. So I'm skipping all these community reports and all that. I don't know if it's going to load right now. I have to log out, like log out. I logged in like half an hour before this class started, and I don't think it liked that. Well, it liked that, but didn't like that it sat here all this time. So let me sign in again real quick just to see if that solved my problem. All right. So I'm logged in again fresh. Home IQ, system monitor. So I skipped all these community type things over here, these run reports, and now I can actually see trend graphs. This is my thermostat of the room I'm sitting in today. Up top here, heat/cool. If it's orange, it's heat. If it's blue, it's cool. And it shows you how long it ran for. So it barely ran any heat today, no cooling. That makes sense because it's like 55 degrees outside. If there was 2 stages, this would be a little bit taller. And over here, it would be stage 1, and right below it would be stage 2. And stage 1 would be like this light orange color, and stage 2 would be dark orange. And if it was cooling, stage 1 would have bars on top for light blue, and then dark blue below that would be stage 2. But I only have 1 stage equipment over here. And then this white bar here shows my fan runtime. So for this particular location, it knows to run the fan, or knows to run occupied mode, which includes the fan in my case, every day from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. It always does that. And then if I happen to show up at this particular building, I usually don't because I'm usually over at Melrose teaching a class. If I'm in this building, then it would know that I'm here and it would keep running. In this case, I came from somewhere else. I came here at, I think it was like 10:45 or whatever. So like after like 15, 20 minutes, it realized I was here and it went into the occupied mode. You can see my set points here. Blue is my cooling, orange is my heating. So there's my away set points, 80 and 65. They tighten up during the occupied mode. Then it went unoccupied, so they loosened up. And then they realized I was here, so it tightened back up again. The green bar on here, or the green line on here, I should say, is the outdoor air temperature. So right now it's 61 degrees outside-ish, right? I can also click on humidity over here, and now I can see the indoor and outdoor humidity and how they've paced over the day. Below the system button, there's a schedule button. This is also, so this system button is useful for a few things. If somebody says something weird, hey, every Tuesday, like it goes really hot in here, it's like 90 degrees, and you come in here like, well, every Tuesday you got to go unoccupied, man. You can go and see what happened back in time. But the other thing that's cool is you can see how much heating and cooling run hours you get. So what I would want you to do is look at some of these stats on really cold or really hot days and just see how little they actually run. If it's a 0 degree day outside, it should be a solid orange bar that never turns off. It should never be able to fully keep up, right? But if you see it like this and it's not solid orange, that means it's cycling on and off, which means it's oversized. So later on when I go to give them a new system, I feel really good about my new load calc and giving them a smaller size unit. And yes, we squeezed in oversizing once more. The schedule feature, you can look at that. This is useful for people that say, yeah, it's doing this weird thing at, every day at like whatever time it does such and such, right? So you can come over here and look. In my case, I had a very small smart recovery band that happened at 6:35 to 6:50. Remember my schedule went occupied right here at 7 o'clock. So it calculated it needed to start at 6:35 to get me up to set points, run the heat a little bit over here to get up to set points. Because it's so mild outside, it did it quicker than it thought. So it was done 10 minutes early. So it went ahead and shut that mode off. All right. I can also see what mode it's supposed to be in here. And then down here is so the top bar is what it's supposed to be in. The bottom bar is what it's actually doing. So yeah, it's unoccupied. Mrs. Jones is like, yeah, it's running heating right now, but I have it scheduled to be off. Yeah, you have it scheduled to be off. Up here it says away, but it's also in smart home feature because you have that feature turned on and it obviously saw you were home. So it's good for troubleshooting that kind of stuff. You could also do the same thing with follow me. You can see if you have multiple sensors, you can see which ones it's following when, right? So yeah, such and such happened. Well, let's see which sensor it thought was working there. You can see run hours. Now this stat I just added onto this particular portal on Monday when I was here, so there's not really much on here. It used to be on a different portal, so there's not really a lot of history, but it will show you the history versus outdoor air temperature. And then you can also download the data and dump it into Excel, and you get a lot more data than I just showed you if you do that. All right, last couple things. If you have one of the new sensors, you have to pair it using the app like I had said. The old sensors, you paired it between the sensor and the stat directly on the screen of the stat. The new sensors, which are nice because they have long battery life and longer range, but you have to pair them on the consumer's app. So the consumer has to have the app and they have to pair to their stat before you can even install their sensors for them. So you click the little hamburger menu button. Lost my little arrow. You click the little hamburger button on there, and then you click on sensors, and then there'll be nothing listed here probably, and you'll go down to the bottom of the list and click add sensors. And you can add them from there, right? When you do that, they'll say, what are you adding, an old style or a new style? If it says it's a new style, it says pull the battery tab and away we go. Excuse me, if it's an old style, it says that. If it's a new style, it says, okay, pull the battery tab and let's see which ones we can find. These are the ones we found. Which one is yours? It's this one here. Okay, click on it. Okay, pair the two together. Okay, and now he'll be on there. So just the screens. It's all good stuff. There's a feature called, or a software program called Smart Buildings Ecobee has for commercial buildings. It is not free. The regular Ecobee portal is for homeowners is free, and you can put light commercial buildings on there as well. They publish the maximum being 15 thermostats on one account. I have put as much as 21 on there and have been fine. But when I put the 22nd stat on there, it crashes my account, locks it up, and I got to beg somebody at Ecobee to unlock it. And then they say, why do you got more than 15 stats on there? So if you have more than 15 stats at a house, I would say make 2 accounts for them. One for the west wing, one for the east wing on the giant house. If you have more than 15 stats at a commercial building, they may want to consider using the Smart Building portal. It has a lot more functionality than the free consumer portal, but it's not free. They got paid for it. And they would pay for that directly to Ecobee, not through us or not through you. Last thing, if you need any follow-up assistance, obviously you can call us at TEC, especially if your question is relating to Ecobee wiring up to Bryant and Carrier equipment. But if you want to take a deep dive into Ecobee stuff and like ask something or like hey, I'm trying to connect this stat, but I'm getting this error message on the website, blah, blah, blah. We're probably not going to know the answer to that off the top of our heads. So you probably would call Ecobee. When you buy thermostats from us, you're going to get pro models, which have the longer warranty, and they're also going to have the professional support number on there, whereas a consumer would get this other one. So don't give the pro number to consumers. All that would do is clog up the lines, making it harder for you to call in someday. Give the consumers the consumer phone number, and when you call for help, you call the pro number. It goes to the same building, but it's different people. The pro number is the more experienced people. The consumer support number is the less experienced people. So you use the pro number, give your customers the customer number, because most of their questions are easy, like, oh, I don't know how to set up Wi-Fi, right? Whereas your question is like, yeah, I got it connected to this weird boiler that has 110 volt power, and I need to run it through this one relay. Yours is going to be a much different kind of question than the customer's going to have. All right, what else? Any other questions? 1 minute over. It was so close. Anybody got anything? Yeah. So it's like one of the quietest audiences I've ever had on a webinar. You guys are all chillax. All right, well, if nobody has any other questions, I did type in the chat box, if you registered and you gave us your NATE number at registration and you attended both weeks, I'll automatically get you credited for NATE, and we'll be good to go. If you forgot to give me register with your NATE number, send me an email. Oh, I typed a typo on there. Send me your email, or send me a note with your email me your NATE number. That's what I want to say. Holy cow, Ryan can't say it. I also can't type. All right, I'm gonna put the correct email in the chat box here. Can't type again. Holy cow. All right, it's ryan.holger@tecmungo.com. Send me an email today with your NATE number, or type it in the chat box right now if you got it on you, and I'll make sure it gets added on there. What other questions? All right, well, with that, I'm going to let you guys go. I thank you for your time, and I'll see you at the next webinar. We do have one coming up next month on smart thermostats in general. This would be a good one for people in your office. It's not necessarily specific to like Ecobee or Nest or anything like that. It's just kind of a generic, hey, what is a smart stat kind of thing. So that would be a good one for just general folks in your office that need to know why customers might want smart stats and that kind of thing. All right, with that, I'll let you guys go. Thank you.